My life has been a string of difficult situations, really. Starting right back when I was in school, that wasn't an easy time for me. I was quite severely bullied all the way through my education. And that, it really kind of knocks your self-esteem, how it makes you question who you are, why you're here. That was then made worse when my father died, when I was only 13 years old. Took him a cup of coffee and he was there having a heart attack on the sofa. And unfortunately, he didn't make it through. Back then, there wasn't really any support, especially for younger children who had experienced any form of grief. There was no kind of structured support in school or at home or in the community. I know that there is a lot more help for children nowadays who do experience things like this. But back then, I think there wasn't studies done on grief or the effect that it can really have and the way that it can really affect your life. That loss really, really affected me, and it sent me on a kind of a self-destructive cycle that I knew was only going to end badly unless I did something about it. So I went on and I studied psychology because I wanted to understand why I felt that way, why I had these feelings and I just couldn't shake them. That really helped me because it helped me give me a name to all of these things that I was struggling with. But it really didn't kind of help me to move past those feelings. So I understood why I had them, but still couldn't change the fact that I was feeling so low, feeling so anxious. Looking back on it now, I realise I think it was kind of a string of unfortunate events, and that the bullying did really feed into that because my self-esteem was so low to begin with. And then going through something so traumatic, it just kind of knocked all the life out of me. But that led me on the path that put me here today. So I now use that to kind of help others and to let other people know that it's okay to not be okay and that we all go through things and life happens, but it's how we move forward and what we do and how we find meaning with those that are important. And this kind of fed into my later life then when I had a car accident. I was driving home from work one day and it was a bit of mud on the road and my car rolled and flipped and I ended up on the wrong side of the carriageway. Luckily there was nobody else in the car with me, but I broke my back. So I spent a month in the hospital, unable to move, and I can say that that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Being stuck in a bed for that long is enough to drive anybody crazy. And then when I did come out of hospital, I had 6 months in a back brace, and that just really brought around a lot of the grief that I had been experiencing in my childhood back into my adult life again, which I really wasn't expecting. I then started to not only grieve for other people, but for lost parts of myself. It completely changed my life. Now I live with chronic pain, and I have done since then. One of the biggest things I think that has helped me on that journey is the way I think about my relationship with pain, and that I'm learning to live with the pain rather than fighting against it. Because if you're trying to fight against it all of the time, you're never going to move forward, and there's always kind of like this to and fro. Whereas if you just kind of accept it and learn to live with it, it really then doesn't shout quite so loud. There's a lot more kind of studies coming out now about how kind of psychology can help with pain management and these kind of things as well, and that it's not just in the body, but it's in our minds as well, and that our minds and bodies are truly connected. The release and the power that you can get from almost kind of saying, no, I'm going to take control of this pain and not let this pain control me. So that was a really kind of profound moment in my healing journey. Later on, scroll forward a few more years, I had a really bad viral infection. This was just before the pandemic, and I then developed chronic fatigue syndrome. It really was not expecting, I'd dealt with a little bit of grief going through with breaking my back, but I really was not expecting the amount of grief that I then was thrown back into my life with that diagnosis of ME, chronic fatigue. And I really did feel like I was that little 13-year-old girl again who'd lost her father. nobody ever talks about this. When you have a chronic illness, you're given all these various different techniques and tools to try and help you move forward and live your life, but nobody talks about the grief with chronic illnesses. And I really think that I'm really passionate about talking about this now and raising awareness that grief is so much more than just bereavement. We can grieve when we go through any form of loss, and that's the loss of anything that was important to us. And of course, we are important to ourselves. So when we lose parts of ourselves, that can cause a grief that's just as big as when we lose somebody outside of ourselves. And I think that was one of the hardest parts of the diagnosis for me to kind of get my head around, because grief kind of accumulates. And if you don't deal with it, it just stacks and stacks and stacks. So then every time you're dealt with a new loss, you're not only dealing with the new loss, but you're also dealing with all the other previous losses that have kind of been before in the past. So it's not until we can kind of acknowledge these and listen to them, witness our grief, witness our own grief, that we can then start to move forward. That's a really important lesson for us to learn, and a really important thing for other people to remember. If you've got a family member or somebody else that is going through some kind of chronic illness or health challenge, that there is a massive amount of grief that goes with that, not just learning to live with whatever condition it is on its own as well. Also very thankful in a way, because it gave me the kick up the arse to do what I knew I was always here to do. I've always known that I was here to kind of help and try and to guide others, and that somebody else might find some inspiration in my story. And I'm hoping that this might inspire you to know that you're not alone, and it's okay to talk about grief. And I think we should all be talking about grief a lot more. It seems to be like one of these words that people just freeze up when they're here and they don't understand. And, they also almost kind of like this blind panic as soon as anybody mentions grief. And I think that we need to talk about it more in our society, more about how it affects us, and that it goes far beyond just a bereavement. That's opened up this whole world of like holistic healing for me, and various other different modalities. And it's given me a greater appreciation for my own life, and being able to find the joy in all of the little things, even if it's just the sunrise or hearing the birds outside, watching my cats play in the garden. Life is full of so many wonderful things. And I think we can get so buried down in the nuts and bolts of life that we really just forget to see all of these lovely gifts that are in every day. And if I hadn't been through that, I don't think I would be looking through the world with the eyes that I do. And obviously wouldn't have liked to have gone through those things, but I wouldn't change it for the world, because it's made me who I am today. And it's shown me the depth of my strength, of my resilience, how empathic and compassionate I can be. It's given me kind of almost a new lease for life in a certain extent. Sometimes I think when we go through these really big, profound experiences in our life, it really does give us a true kind of appreciation. And I think that's one of the fantastic things with this modern world and technology and the internet, and that there are so many communities out there of people who are dealing with things similar to you. The weight of it is so much less heavy if you can share it with somebody else. If we only talk about the good times, we can't move forward and we can't grow. It's all about kind of finding the little lessons buried within all of these moments, and how they can help us and show us like who we truly are, what we stand for. I think since the pandemic, there is so much collective grief in the world at the moment, and with the climate emergency as well, that the world is really heavy, And if we don't get this heaviness off our chest, it will just eat you alive. If you try and keep it buried up, it never ends badly. I mean, that's what I tried to do in my teenage years, and that sent me on a self-destructive cycle. It's not good for you. So if that's you and you're struggling to speak about it, I just encourage you to find somebody and share your pain with somebody else, because a problem shared is definitely a problem halved. Before I mentioned that there's been certain modalities that have helped me kind of with my grief. And one of the ones that anybody can do is just writing. And if you're not a big writer, use a voice note and just let it out. Our thoughts seem so much less scary if we just put them down on the paper, and then they're not all rattling around in our head. we don't end up in this state of overwhelm, almost kind of giving them form what makes them seem less scary and helps us to order them a bit more. And then you can start to notice some patterns in your thinking or patterns in your behavior that can then help you to start to move forward. And if you don't know what to write, just start with what you did that day. Just keep it nice and simple and just let it flow. Once you start getting the words out, they just won't stop eventually. Another thing for me that I've found really helpful is just prayer and meditation, being still with myself and just allowing myself to actually feel those feelings and feel those thoughts, because feelings aren't good or bad, they're just feelings and we're completely valid to have them. But it's where the problem comes when we try and hold on to those feelings and we get stuck. We need to be able to express them in order to move through them and move past them, and then kind of understand, what is that feeling trying to tell me? What is that tenseness in my body trying to teach me? Where is this coming from? Another thing that's been really, really helpful for me has been the energetic healing powers of Reiki, because it's just really allowed me to drop into my body and really notice what parts of my body are trying to tell me, where am I feeling stiff? Where is that pain coming from today? Where is it talking? What do I need to do? What haven't I been stretching? Have I been hunched over the computer too much or stood at a funny angle trying to do something else? And it really dropping into your body and just listening to your body is such an important thing. That has been really, really helpful for me. And also with my thoughts and my feelings as well. It's really helped me kind of like quieten down my racing mind and explore my feelings in a new way without actually having to kind of express them. Also reading other people's stories, reading other books, and realizing that so many people in this world, and we've all been through so many different things, but there's a common thread between us all, so that you can find some kind of inspiration or ideas for coping through other people who've walked a similar path to you. It's one of the great things with it being so much easier to kind of write books, and with podcasts as well. I think they're absolutely fantastic. It's a great way to kind of share. Another thing that's been really helpful for me has been heart healing, which is kind of a meditative journeying, and that takes you into a subconscious state and allows you to kind of go back to hard times in your life without actually having to go back to that experience itself, and allows you to express those feelings of guilt and anger and shame free from any judgment. And I think there's always a lot of guilt and there's always a lot of anger with grief. Anger and guilt aren't necessarily negative emotions. A lot of people kind of get scared when they get angry, but I think, it shows that you were really passionate about whatever it was that you lost. And, then that pain is real to you. It's fired up something inside you to the point where you've just got to let it out. But if you don't express that anger, then you push it down, it will just eat you up alive. I think it's really important to be able to express your feelings. And with drawing and art therapy, the fantastic thing is just if you're not good with words and journaling, just draw a picture, let your art speak for your feelings and for your emotions, and just get it out on the paper, whether that's in word or in picture or painting, or find some kind of outlet for your emotions. Nature is always the world's greatest healers, in my opinion. Just getting outdoors and being in nature. It doesn't have to be like a big hike in the woods, or it can just be at your local park, but just get outdoors and feel the wind on your face and listen to the birds in the sky. That real connection to the earth is so grounding, and that feeling of being part of something bigger, being, part of the world is really powerful. If I could go back in time and give some advice to my mum who was dealing with me, or other adults in my community that I was with, was just allow them to speak about it. Allow them to have those feelings, allow them to be angry, allow them to be sad, allow them to ask those awkward questions, and allow them to be a part of the process. I was really, really thankful for my mum, because she stood up for us and allowed us to be there at my father's death certificate signing. And we went to the funeral home and we saw him and we said goodbye. And I think if I hadn't have been able to do that, I would have been in such a worse place than I am now. I think children are so much more resilient and so much stronger and far more capable of understanding much more than we give them credit for. They know what it means. So don't block them out. Don't try and wrap them in cotton wool. Let them be a part of it. Just tell them the truth. Don't have to give them the whole truth, but give them pieces of the truth, enough of that so that they can really truly feel like they're part of that grieving process, part of the funeral process, part of your grieving process as a parent as well. Just don't shut them out.